A house can look perfect in one room and still feel unfinished the moment you walk into the next one. The kitchen might be wiped down, but the hallway is full of shoes. The bedroom might be calm, but the closet is a small disaster waiting behind a door nobody wants to open. The living room looks fine until you notice the dining table buried under mail, and the entryway already smells like wet boots from 3 days ago. That is one of the strange truths about a tidy home. It is never really about one room. It is about whether every room is quietly following the same set of rules. In the 1950s, many homes did not have extra space to hide a problem in. There was no spare bedroom to dump things into, no second garage, no walk-in closet the size of a small office. Every room had a job, and every room had its own small discipline that kept it from sliding into chaos. Not because the women running these homes had more time. Many of them had far less help than people imagine, and far more physical work than most households face today. They kept every room in order because they treated each room differently, with its own quiet system, instead of cleaning the whole house the same way and hoping it would stick. That is really the secret, hiding underneath all of this. A spotless home is not one big habit. It is 17 small ones, each one matched to the room it protects. If you enjoy remembering the kind of household wisdom that never got written down in a magazine, but somehow got passed from a mother to a daughter anyway, stay with us and consider subscribing. We are going room by room through the forgotten habits that kept 1950s homes feeling finished, not just cleaned. Before we begin, one honest note. None of this means life was simple back then, or that women had it easy keeping a home this way. Many carried a heavy, unfair weight to make a house look effortless. We are not here to romanticize that pressure. We are here to borrow the practical wisdom buried inside it. The kind of wisdom that still works today, whether or not anyone is watching. Let's start at the very edge of the house, before anyone even steps inside. Number 1. The entryway was the first line of defense. Many 1950s homes treated the entry the way a castle treats a gate. It was not just a place to walk through. It was where the outside world either got stopped or got let in to make a mess everywhere else. There was often a mat outside the door and another one just inside it. Shoes had a spot, even if that spot was nothing more than a corner by the closet or a low shelf near the stairs. A coat had a hook. An umbrella had a stand or a designated corner that never moved. This was not decoration, it was function. If dirt, water, and clutter were stopped right there, the rest of the house never had to deal with them. Modern homes often skip this step entirely. People walk straight through the front door in their shoes, drop bags wherever their arms get tired, and let the entryway slowly become a junk pile that grows toward the living room. The mess does not start big. It starts as one dropped bag, then a coat over a chair, then mail nobody opened, until the entrance to the home looks like the room that gave up first. The old habit worked because it drew a line. Outside stays outside. What comes in gets handled immediately, not eventually. A home with a disciplined entryway feels different the second you walk in, Because the first thing you see is order, not evidence of everyone's day. Number 2. Closets were edited, not crammed. A 1950s closet usually held far less than a modern one. But that was not only because people owned fewer clothes. It was because closets were treated as a working space that had to function, not a place to store anything you didn't know what else to do with. Hangers were spaced enough to actually see what was hanging. Shoes lined the floor instead of piling into a heap. A shelf held folded sweaters that were rotated by season, not stacked endlessly until the pile became unstable. If something no longer fit, no longer worked, or simply wasn't being worn, it usually did not stay in the closet out of guilt. It was mended, passed along, or repurposed into something else, like a cleaning rag or a quilt square. Today, closets often become the place where decisions get postponed. An outfit that might fit again someday. A coat that was expensive so it feels wasteful to remove, even if it has not been worn in 3 years. A box of items to deal with later. That later rarely comes, and the closet door gets harder to close. The old habit understood something simple. A closet that is too full stops being useful. It becomes a wall you avoid instead of a tool you use. Editing it regularly, even in small ways, kept the room behind that door from becoming its own private mess that nobody else ever saw, but everyone quietly knew was there. Number 3. The dining room stayed ready between meals. In many 1950s homes, the dining table had a strange kind of power. It was used constantly for meals, homework, sewing, letter writing, and family conversation. And yet, it was almost always cleared in between. The tablecloth, if there was one, got brushed off or changed. A centerpiece, even something as small as a short vase or a folded napkin holder, sat in the middle as a kind of anchor that told everyone, this table has a purpose, and it is not storage. Crumbs were wiped before they were tracked into a rug. Chairs were pushed back in. This habit mattered because a cluttered dining table changes the mood of an entire room. It becomes the kind of surface a family avoids using, which pushes meals toward the couch or the kitchen counter, which removes the dining room from daily life almost entirely. Once a room stops being used the way it was meant to be used, it becomes a magazine rack, a mail pile, or a forgotten space that collects dust until a holiday forces it back into service. The old discipline avoided that slide. The table was cleared because the table mattered. A room kept ready for its purpose rarely turns into a dumping ground because it never gets the chance. Number 4. Bedrooms got a 5-minute reset, not just a made bed. We already know the bed itself mattered enormously in the 1950s home, but the habit went further than just smoothing the sheets. Many women gave the whole bedroom a brief daily reset, even in a room nobody but the family would ever see. Clothes from the day before were either hung back up or placed in a hamper, never left draped over a chair for a week. A nightstand held only what was truly needed. A lamp, a clock, maybe a small dish for jewelry. Not a graveyard of cups and folded papers. Curtains were opened to let light in, which had the side effect of making any mess immediately visible, and therefore harder to ignore. Modern bedrooms often become the room where clutter is allowed to hide, because the door closes and guests never see it. A chair becomes a clothes pile. The nightstand becomes a small landfill of receipts, chargers, and half-finished water glasses. The floor becomes the easiest place to drop something, rather than walk it to where it belongs. The old habit treated the bedroom as worthy of the same 5 minutes of care as any guest-facing room, even though no guest would ever see it. That was the quiet point. A private room cared for in private says something different than a private room ignored simply because no one is watching. Number 5. The linen closet had a strict folding order. A linen closet in a 1950s home was rarely large, which forced a discipline that modern, oversized linen closets often lose. Sheets were folded a specific way, often tucked into their matching pillowcase, so a full set could be grabbed in one motion. Towels were stacked by size. Older linens were rotated to the bottom or the back, so they got used evenly instead of sitting untouched, while newer ones wore out from overuse. This sounds almost too small to matter, but it solved a very real problem. A linen closet without order becomes a place where you pull out 3 sheets before finding the right size, then shove the wrong ones back in a hurry, and within a month, the whole closet is a soft fabric avalanche waiting to fall on whoever opens the door next. The old system avoided that by having a rule for everything, even folding. It was never about being rigid for its own sake. It was about making sure a closet that holds dozens of similar-looking items could still be used quickly by anyone in the house without unpacking the entire shelf to find one matching pillowcase. Number 6. The pantry was inventoried by eye. Long before apps and labeled bins became common, many 1950s kitchens kept a pantry that was checked constantly, simply by looking at it. Jars were grouped by type. Cans were often turned label out and arranged so older stock sat in front of newer purchases, an old habit that modern stores still use today for the exact same reason. This mattered because a disorganized pantry creates 2 expensive problems. You buy something you already own because you couldn't see it, and you forget about something until it spoils because it was buried behind everything else. A 1950s woman managing a tighter household budget could not really afford either mistake, so the pantry stayed visually simple enough to scan in a few seconds. Modern pantries, especially larger ones, often become a place where bulk purchases pile up without much order until nobody actually knows what is in there. The old habit was not about owning fewer groceries. It was about being able to see what you owned at a glance, which is a very different kind of organization than simply having more shelves. Number 7. Windows and curtains were never an afterthought. Many homes from this era treated windows as part of the room's character, not just glass that let light in. Curtains were aired out, sometimes taken down completely for a seasonal wash. Windowsills were wiped of dust and dead insects before they became a layer nobody noticed until it was thick. Glass was polished with a vinegar and water mixture, an old trick that still works better than most modern sprays. The reason this mattered goes beyond appearance. Dirty windows physically dim a room. They make daylight feel weaker, which makes the whole space feel more tired and dated, even if everything else is spotless. A clean window does something almost invisible. It makes a tidy room look even more cared for, because light moves through it the way it is supposed to. This is one of the habits modern homes skip most often, simply because window cleaning rarely makes anyone's weekly list. But a home that smells clean, looks organized, and still has streaky, dusty windows will always feel slightly less finished than it should. Number 8. The porch was swept like an extra room. A front porch or back stoop in the 1950s was often treated as a genuine extension of the house, not an outdoor afterthought. It was swept, sometimes daily, especially in homes near unpaved roads or dusty yards. A mat near the door was shaken out. A chair, if there was one, was wiped down rather than left to collect a film of dust and pollen. This habit existed because the porch acted as a buffer zone. Whatever dirt, leaves, or grit collected there had a much smaller chance of making it inside the house, simply because there was less of it sitting right at the threshold. A neglected porch, by contrast, becomes the exact mess that gets tracked indoors on the bottom of everyone's shoes. Today, porches and entry steps are often the most neglected outdoor space in a home, treated as somewhere between indoors and outdoors, and therefore nobody's job. The old habit understood that this in-between space deserved its own quick care, precisely because everything that happens there ends up walking straight into the rest of the house. Number 9. The garage had a place for every tool. Garages, basements, and sheds in many 1950s homes were not the chaotic catch-alls they often become today. Tools hung on a board, sometimes outlined so it was obvious at a glance if something was missing. Paint cans were labeled with the room they matched. Nails, screws, and small hardware lived in old jars or tins, lined up rather than tossed loose into a drawer. This mattered for a very practical reason. A garage without order eventually becomes unusable for its actual purpose. Parking a car, fixing something, or finding a simple tool in under a minute. Once that happens, the garage becomes a room the family avoids, which means anything dropped there stays there indefinitely, since nobody wants to dig through it. A 1950s household, often working with one car and a tighter budget for replacing lost tools, could not really afford to lose a hammer in a pile of clutter. So the system stayed simple, visible, and consistent, which is exactly why it worked. Number 10. Children's rooms were tidied together, not alone. In many homes of this era, a child's room was not expected to organize itself. But it also was not entirely the parent's job either. Tidying happened together, often as a short, almost playful routine before bed or before going outside. Toys had a box or a shelf. Books had a spot, even a simple stack in a corner. The expectation was clear and repeated daily, so it never became a single overwhelming chore that built up for a week. This worked because it taught a rhythm early, rather than asking a child to suddenly produce a clean room out of nowhere once a week. which almost never goes well in any era. A small, repeated reset done alongside a parent kept a child's room from spiraling into the kind of mess that takes an entire afternoon and several arguments to fix. Modern households sometimes either over-organize a child's room with elaborate bins and labels that get ignored, or under-organize it entirely and treat the mess as inevitable. The old habit sat in between. Keep it simple, keep it daily, and keep it shared so the room stayed manageable without becoming a battlefield. Number 11. The hallway carried nothing but feet. A hallway in a 1950s home was rarely allowed to become storage, no matter how tempting the empty wall space might have looked. It existed purely to move people from one room to another, and it was kept that way on purpose. No stack of boxes waiting to be dealt with. No pile of shoes spreading further down the hall each week. No chair holding clothes that didn't quite make it to the closet. If a hallway had anything sitting in it, it was treated as a sign that something, somewhere else in the house, had failed to be put away. This mattered because a blocked or cluttered hallway makes an entire home feel smaller and more chaotic, even if every room off of it is perfectly clean. People notice transition spaces almost subconsciously. A hallway that flows easily makes a home feel calm before you've even reached the room you were heading to. Number 12. The attic and basement were visited on purpose. Storage spaces like attics and basements existed in many 1950s homes, but they were not allowed to become a black hole where anything unwanted simply vanished forever. These spaces were visited on a rough seasonal schedule, often tied to spring cleaning or preparing for winter, specifically to sort through what had accumulated. Boxes were labeled. Items that hadn't been touched in a year or two were reconsidered, mended, donated, or finally let go. The goal was never a perfectly empty attic. It was an attic that still made sense if you needed to find something in it. Today, attics and basements often become the place where decisions go to die, filled with things nobody wants to deal with, but nobody wants to throw away either. The old habit avoided that buildup with a simple rule. Storage space still needs a regular visit, or it eventually stops being storage and starts being a problem you'll face all at once, usually during a move when you have the least time to deal with it. Number 13. The car was treated like a room of the house. This habit surprises people, but many 1950s households treated the family car with almost the same care as an extra room. The interior was wiped down. Trash did not accumulate on the floor for weeks. A small bag or pouch sometimes held gloves, a rag, or a few coins for tolls and errands, kept in one spot rather than scattered across the seats. The reasoning was simple. A car was often a significant investment, and a messy car tended to become a messier car very quickly. The same way one unwiped counter becomes a pile of crumbs and wrappers within days. Keeping it tidy as you went meant it rarely needed an exhausting all-day clean-out. Modern cars, especially in busier households, often become a second junk drawer on wheels, full of forgotten cups, stray papers, and items that were supposed to go inside the house weeks ago. The old habit treated the car as one more space deserving the same daily attention as any room with a door, simply because it functioned as an extension of the home. Number 14. Mirrors and glass got a quick polish. Beyond windows, smaller glass surfaces, mirrors, picture frames, glass tabletops, and cabinet fronts received frequent, light attention rather than being saved for a deep clean. A quick wipe with a cloth, sometimes dampened with a touch of vinegar water, kept these surfaces from building up the smudges and dust film that make a room look neglected even when it technically isn't dirty. This mattered because glass shows imperfection more obviously than almost any other surface in a home. A dusty shelf can go unnoticed for a while. A smudged mirror catches the eye instantly, every single time you walk past it. Keeping these surfaces consistently clear made rooms look finished with very little effort. Because the one thing that draws attention the fastest was already taken care of. Number 15. The phone table or desk corner stayed clear. Almost every 1950s home had some version of a small, dedicated spot for the telephone and the handful of items that came with it. A notepad, a pencil, perhaps a small address book. This spot was protected the same way the entryway landing zone was protected. It was not allowed to become a catch-all surface because it needed to stay usable the moment the phone rang. This is the direct ancestor of what many modern homes now call a command center or charging station, and it often suffers from the same modern problem. It quietly becomes the place where everything with no other home ends up. Mail, chargers, keys, loose change, until the one functional surface in the house turns into the most cluttered one. The old habit kept this spot small and protected on purpose. A surface with one clear job rarely turns into a junk pile, because using it the right way takes priority over dumping things onto it. Number 16. Light switches, doorknobs, and handles got wiped. This is one of the smallest, least glamorous habits on this list, but it mattered more than it seems. Light switches, doorknobs, cabinet handles, and refrigerator door pulls were wiped down periodically. Not because anyone was thinking about germs in the modern sense, but because hands touch these spots constantly, and grime builds up there faster than almost anywhere else in a home. A home can look spotless from a distance and still feel slightly off if every doorknob is faintly sticky or every switch plate has a dull, smudged ring around it. These tiny details are the kind of thing visitors notice without consciously realizing why a room feels less cared for than it looks. The old habit caught this early with a damp cloth during a normal cleaning pass, rather than waiting for it to become noticeable enough to bother anyone. Number 17. The whole house got a 5-minute walkthrough before bed. This final habit tied every other one together. Before the day fully ended, many women walked through the house room by room, just briefly. A cushion straightened here, a stray shoe moved there, a light switched off, a door quietly closed. It was not a deep clean, it was a final check, making sure every room that had been set right that day was still right before the house went quiet for the night. This mattered because small slips happen constantly throughout a normal day, and most of them are invisible until they pile up. A 5-minute walkthrough caught them before they had a chance to multiply overnight into something bigger by morning. It is, in many ways, the habit that protected all 16 others. Every room could have its own daily discipline, but without this final check, small exceptions would slowly creep back in everywhere, one missed detail at a time, until the whole system quietly fell apart. Looking back across all 17 of these habits, a pattern becomes clear. The entryway stopped mess at the door. The closets and linen closet stayed organized enough to actually use. The dining room and bedroom kept their purpose instead of becoming storage. The pantry, garage, and car were all treated as functioning spaces, not places where things simply disappeared. The hallway, porch, and attic were never allowed to become the home's hidden dumping grounds. The smallest details, glass, switches, handles, were caught early instead of left to dull a room nobody could quite explain why it felt tired. And the nightly walkthrough quietly protected every single one of those systems from slowly unraveling. None of this required more space, more products, or more time than most households actually have today. It required a rule for each room, followed in small, repeated moments, instead of one exhausting effort that tried to fix everything at once. We say this every time, because it deserves to be said honestly. None of this means the pressure many women carried to maintain a home this way was fair, or that life back then was simpler. It often was not. But the systems themselves, room by room, habit by habit, still hold something worth keeping, whether or not anyone is there to notice the difference. If this brought back a memory of a home that always felt finished in a way you couldn't quite explain at the time, you now know part of why. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and stay with us for more of the forgotten room-by-room wisdom that quietly kept these homes feeling whole.